Hello, everyone. I'm Chen. I'm a third-year PhD student at Brown University working with Carsten Eickhoff, who's here in this room. Really enjoyed the presentation, Veronica. It actually is a great primer for my presentation. You looked at a bunch of response dimensions across explainability and kind of wondered how we can compare the trade-offs between utility and the effort. And today I'll hopefully try to answer some of those questions on how we can quantify those response dimensions and use those to evaluate explainable search systems in the web search domain. So as we all know, a large issue with AI models these days is that they're considered to be black boxes in the sense that we get some input, model performs some magic, and we get the output, but we have no idea how it got there. And with explainable AI methods, the goal here is to provide some explanations that shed light on how the model got to its decision. However, there are some existing issues that we kind of started to touch upon today with the current approach to explainability. And the first is that explainability is often considered to be a singular notion. As we saw with Veronica's presentation, instead we should think about potentially exploring explainability as a notion of several subfactors, and this is well supported in the literature. The second is that evaluation often occurs on a binary scale, and that's to say something either is explainable or it's not. Instead, we should be evaluating explainability on a continuous scale and have different models with different degrees of explainability, and this will allow us to trade off explainability with performance in a more flexible manner than what is currently possible today. Furthermore, by breaking down explainability as a function of several subfactors or subdimensions, it'll allow us to identify specific areas where systems may need to be improved. So to address these shortcomings in the current state of XAI evaluation, first, we use factor analysis to identify factors of explainability to create this multidimensional model. And then we take that multidimensional model and take it one step further to introduce SSE, which is a user-centric evaluation metric for measuring search system explainability on a continuous scale. To do this, we adopt a psychometric approach, which has been previously used to model relevance in a multidimensional manner. Explainability, as we can see, is highly dependent on the users, and you can say that it's in the eye of the beholder, or the searcher in this case. So we can treat it as kind of a cognitive trait in the sense that it's a very subjective notion. So we turn to the field of psychology and take inspiration from the psychometrics. And in this field, it's known that cognitive traits cannot be observed directly, but we can ask questions that will represent manifestations of these factors. So then how do we identify important explainability factors? Our approach is to gather several candidates from the literature and use factor analysis to test whether or not users actually care about them. So to do this, we performed a comprehensive lit review, looking through Google Scholar, proceedings of top conferences, and distilling them down to assess whether or not they talk about interpretability, explainability, or transparency. We then read the abstracts and conclusions just to make sure that they were mentioning any dimensions or aspects. From our lit review, we found 26 different aspects from 14 papers that were kind of the most well-discussed dimensions of explainability. If you're interested in the list of all of those papers, please check out our paper for a nice table and definitions of exactly what those dimensions are. Using these aspects we found from the literature, we created a questionnaire in which we had 2 questions or items per aspect for a total of 52 different items. And these questionnaire items were evaluated for clarity by our lab members. Now, an example of a questionnaire item is shown here. Here I've chosen 2 different dimensions or aspects and their corresponding questionnaire items. For example, trustworthiness, the corresponding questionnaire item would be that I trust that the results are ordered correctly and that the system will order results correctly for other queries. Example of another one is causality. And our questionnaire item is, it's clear to me why the given query produced the displayed results. So we have these questionnaire items across all of the different aspects, and we ask users to rate these items on a 7-point Likert scale, from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So to determine which aspects of explainability users found most important, we conducted a crowdsourcing task. For this, we asked users to perform a search task. We selected 10 topics from the Track Robust track and asked users to perform to answer a multiple choice question. And they were given a collection of documents to help perform their search. And we collected around 450 responses after some quality control filtering. After the users performed the search task, they were then presented with our questionnaire, in which they were asked to answer the questionnaire based off of one of 3 different search interfaces, which varied on degrees of explainability. The first one was this non-transparent baseline that you might see in your everyday search engine. The second showed relevance and confidence scores on the ranking of the model. And then the last one showed these query term importance bars. And these interfaces were all based off of interfaces that have been suggested by other researchers in the field. And here is an example on what these interfaces might look like. As you can see in the second and third ones, these have a little bit more explainability aspects to them, in which we show percentages for relevance and confidence, and we show how the query breaks down into separate terms and the importance of the queries in relation to each document. So using the responses we collected from our crowdsourcing task, we used factor analysis to come up with a 2-factor hierarchical model in which the factors broadly group into the utility or the usefulness of explanations in a system, and we also identify critical roadblocks. So kind of similar to the findings of actually Veronica, of the users really cared about whether or not explanations were present in the system, and they really honed in on when they were not. Okay. So using this 2-factor hierarchical model, then we can create a evaluation metric on quantifying search system explainability. So the way that we do this is here's the equation if you're interested. Essentially, this is a weighted sum of all the responses to the survey items corresponding to each factor. And I'll walk you through how that breaks down. So let's take our utility factor as an example. So in the squares, we have all of the original explainability aspects or dimensions that represent a questionnaire item. And we take all of the users' responses to those questionnaire items and first then multiply them by their factor loading, which is essentially a representation of how important is that questionnaire item or that aspect to this utility factor. We sum those all up and then multiply that by this importance factor of the utility to the overall notion of explainability, and we do that across the positive dimension of utility and kind of the negative dimension of the roadblocks to explainability. We also did an evaluation of our evaluation metrics just to show that it can discern between 2 different systems, and we repeated our crowdsourcing task for this evaluation just on 2 interfaces this time. We performed them on the non-transparent baseline, and we performed them on the interface that showed the query term importance bars. And the blue is the baseline non-transparent system, and the orange is the more explainable system, and we indeed verify that higher SSE scores are indicative of more explainable systems. So what does this all mean in the grander context of things? I think the utility of this is that our metric allows for targeted system improvements. This is a diagram showing all of the different aspects. I don't think there's, the takeaway from this is that you can really see the difference between the explainable and the non-explainable system across all the different dimensions of explainability. And you can see the disparities between the two. So what this means is that you can use, essentially do A/B testing when you're introducing new features to a system to evaluate whether or not which features are lacking in explainable capability and improve them. And when you introduce improvements, you can run your evaluation again and see if your change actually made a difference in the user's perception of explainability. And one thing to note is that we did perform our experiments on a web search task, but the flexibility of the framework allows it to be extended to other domains and other use cases where the definition of explainability might be a little bit different, and you might need some other features, such as in the medical domain, they might be looking for different things. So if you're interested in using our metric, feel free to check out our paper. And I'll also be presenting another explainability paper in the neural IR session if you would like to hear more about how we take a look under the hood of black box transformer neural models. Thank you.